really want to provide you with a quick overview of Google Sheets so that you're understanding how to use it. You can start with a blank, and this is what your Google workbook will look like. So every time you open a new file in Google Sheets, that's considered a workbook, and within the workbook there is one sheet by default, and it's called Sheet 1. You are able to change the name of that particular sheet. You can change the color of the sheet. Okay, there are a few other things you can do there. You can also add additional sheets. So sometimes you're working on one project, but you'll need multiple data tables or charts that you might want to include. So you can click the plus button to add a sheet, and then you'll have a second sheet. Okay. If you don't need a sheet, you can always come in and also delete the sheet. And you'll notice you can duplicate a sheet. So if you create a table and you want the same exact table, you can duplicate it. Sometimes you want to make some changes. Maybe it's a second day, but the table is exactly the same. So you might want to duplicate a sheet. You can also copy a sheet to a new spreadsheet. Okay, so there are some different things you can do in there. And I'm going to delete this one. Okay, the other thing I wanted to mention, you can retitle your files right here. All right, it's always a good idea to name your files. For school purposes, I usually encourage you to put a period number in front of the file name and give it a project name. So, if this was a science table for some reason, you might want to give it a project name. Okay, so if it was like a hurricane project, you might say hurricane table or something along those lines. And then usually I'll put another minus sign in there, and then your last name. All right, it's always a good way to name a file. This way you know what class it belongs to, you know what project it is, the teacher knows what project it is, and of course we know who the project belongs to. You can also move these within your drive by clicking on the folder. I'm not sure if you know this. This is a good way to move files. So it automatically then will access your drive, and then you might have maybe a class called math, and you might want to put it in your math folder, and then you can just move it like that. Okay. If that's not where you want it, you can always move it again right from there. So you don't actually have to open Google Drive. Right from within the file, you can move your files around in your drive without actually opening up Google Drive. Okay, so there's that. Okay, if you need to create a new folder for some reason, you can even do that right here within the file itself, again, without having to open up Google Drive and do it separately. Okay, so if this was supposed to be a science folder instead, you could do that. You can click the Create Folder checkbox, and then you can move the file there. All right, a couple other quick things. You'll notice there's a pull-down menu, just like many of the other G Suite applications that we use. And underneath each pull-down menu, you'll see a variety of different commands. Okay, there's a lot in this program. This is a very, very complex program, but it is fairly simple to use, at least some of the basic tools that we're going to be using for our projects in class. Okay, and in addition to the pull-down menus, there's also icons, and if you're trying to figure out what any of those little icons mean, if you hover over them, they will tell you exactly what those are. And notice that if there's ever a little arrow next to one of these, if you click the arrow, okay, it will open up a bunch of different related commands. Okay, and there are a few of those. Here's another one, vertical align, right? You can center align or middle align. You can bottom align. Here's another one, text wrapping. Within text wrapping, there's a couple of different options for overflow, wrap, and clip. Okay, so take note to those. And then finally, when using a spreadsheet, you'll notice that there are columns that go up and down, and the columns are labeled by letters. And if you click on any letter at the top of the column, it will highlight everything in the column. So if you wanted to make this entire column on the entire spreadsheet a certain color, you can click the C and it will highlight the entire column, and then you can click the green fill bucket, and now everything in this spreadsheet to infinity, right, all the way down, will just keep going forever. That will then be green. You don't usually want to do that, but sometimes you do. Sometimes there are some formatting options that you do want to apply to, everything in a table. And even if your table isn't that big, if it is going to go all the way down to the end of your table, this is one way that you can do that. Okay, the same happens for rows, except rows are not lettered, they're numbered. Okay, row 3, row 5, row 7, and that highlights everything across. So your columns, like a building, will go up and down, and your rows will go side to side, just like you want to row your boat side to side. If you row your boat up and down, you're going to sink. Columns go up and down. Okay, now you'll notice that there are some very light boxes in the columns and in the rows. Those boxes are called cells. Every cell has a cell address that's identified by its column first and then by its row. So if I click in a cell like this one, and you think about what the title of that cell address is going to be, you look for the column first. So this is D, and then it's row 8. And so this would be considered cell D8. This one here, take a guess. And I think you're correct if you said B3. All right. If you ever played the game Battleship, works very similar to that, right? It's also like latitude lines and longitude lines that go up and down. It's just a grid pattern, and then you can identify those specifically by, again, column and row. Okay, so that's most of what you will need to know to use Google Sheets. The other, couple of things, you can share files, you can change sharing settings. If I've assigned you something or a teacher assigns you something in Google Classroom and gives you a template, you don't have to change the share settings, but sometimes you might need to change the share settings if you're starting from scratch on your own, or if you're collaborating with a student on a project. This is where you can share that with that student and give them access to edit as well. Okay, so that's just a quick overview. In the next video, you'll watch a tutorial that will specifically show you how to create a data table and eventually how to create a chart using Google Sheets. Thanks for watching. I hope this helps, and good luck. The world is counting on you.